I hope that you are well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 8 English lesson. It's actually a high school advanced writing, but we're specifically going to be focusing on a grade 8 lesson on subject verb agreement. All right, and before we start with our lesson on subject verb agreement, we are going to log into aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of language arts, grade 8. We're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of subject verb agreement. All right, so we're doing subject verb agreement. And our chapter is subject verb agreement. The subject is English language arts, grade 8. And the lessons that we're going to be focusing on under the chapter of subject verb agreement is to use the correct verb with compound subject, and to correct errors with subject verb agreement. All right. So when it comes to subject verb agreement, right, a compound subject is made up of two sentences, right? And these two sentences are joined by a conjunction. And conjunctions are words such as and, or, nor, or but, right? So a compound subject is made up of two subjects joined by conjunction, which is or, and, nor, and but. For example, Mark and Amanda, right? Then we have this week or next. So it's Mark and Amanda. It's two compound subjects. This week or next. Neither Josh nor my friends. So it's a compound subject. And when a compound subject is joined by and, then we need to use the plural verb. Plural referring to more than one. we need to use the plural verb. And plural verbs do not end in S, it do not end in ES, and it do not end in IES. And an example is, where do Mark and Amanda go to school? All right. So when it comes to subject verb agreements, also, right, we say that a compound subject is made up of two subjects, right? And the subject tells us who is doing the action, tells us who they are specifically talking about, right? And it's joined by conjunction, which is and, or, nor. And when a compound subject is joined by or nor, then we need to use a verb that agrees with the subject that is closest to the verb. All right, so if the subject is closest to the verb, then it is singular, right? So if the subject closest to the verb is singular, then we need to use a singular verb. And singular verbs, they end in s, es, or ies. So singular verbs, they end in s, es, or ies. For example, this week or next seems likely to be hectic. So seems, and it ends with an S. Likely to be hectic, meaning it's going to be a busy week. All right. And if a subject if the subject is closest to the verb and it is plural, right? Plural referring to more than one person, then we use a plural verb, right? Again, a plural verb, it usually does not, we did say it does not end in s, es, and ies. All right. So we see it when it comes to subjects, right? The compound subjects that is closest to the verb, then we have our singular subjects and we have our plural subjects, right? And the singular subjects, it ends in s, es, or ies. All right. So, and we say that when it is a plural, when the subject is closest to the verb, which is plural, right? And then we do not, our verbs do not end in s, es, or ies. All right. So after reading these reviews, neither Josh nor my friends expect the movie to be successful. All right. So when it comes to also a compound subject, we said it is made up of two subjects and it is joined by conjunction, which is and, or nor, right? And we are doing a tutorial lesson on aplusstudents.ca. So we're going to aplusstudents.ca and we're going to use the correct verb, which is with a compound subject. All right. So compound subject is made up of two subjects that is joined by conjunction, which is and, or, nor. And remember, it is a compound subject, not a compound sentence, not the whole sentence, right? So when we join the two words, which is the subjects, right, we can either join it by using the coordinating conjunctions of and, or nor, right? And remember, it is not an entire sentence that is being joined with another one. All right. So when it also comes to our compound subjects, right? Remember we said a compound subject is basically the thing or person that does the action, right? Not the whole entire sentence. Then we have plural verbs and we have singular verbs, right? When it comes to plural verbs, we do not, it does not end in s, es, or ies. And we have our singular verbs, right? And our singular verbs, they end in s, es, or in ies, right? For example, depending on which of my relatives you ask, either Aunt Carly or Uncle James. Now we need to say if it's bake or bakes the best rhubarb pie. So we need to choose between do they bake or bakes rhubarb scones. All right. So here we said that depending on which of my relatives you ask, either on Carly or Uncle James, we can say bakes the best rhubarb pie, right? So bakes the best rhubarb pie. So bakes it is. Then it says, whenever we go camping, either Martha or Oscar, then we can say, do they set up the tent or they sits up the tent, right? So either sit up the tent or sits up the tent while Shannon and I start the campfire. All right, now let's go to our test. So we're going to begin our test where we are going to choose um, the completed with the base verb, right? And it says the award-winning author and editor, do we say speaks to audiences of writers and students every week, or speak to audiences of writers and students every week? So the award-winning author and his editor, do we say speaks or speak to audiences of writers and students well every week? All right, so the award-winning author and his editor, we can say speak to audiences of writers every week. So is speak, because we said that if it is plural, we do not add an s, es, or ies. We only add s, es, or ies if it is singular, like a singular subject. Mr. Griffin's beautiful old house, small statues and porcelain vases, do we say, fills the shelves of the living room and den, or fill the shelves of the living room and den? All right. So we can say Mr. Griffin fills. Oh, full. Hmm. So it's full, not fulls. All right. So on rainy days, Daryl and his friends, do we say like to invent new board games or likes to invent new board games on rainy days? So on rainy days, Daryl and his friends like to invent new board games or likes to invent new board games. All right. So we said on rainy days, Daryl and his friends like to invent new board games. So like is correct because Daryl and his friends on rainy days like to invent board games. So depending on which of my relatives you ask, either Aunt Leah or Uncle Peter, do we say bake or bakes the best rhubarb cake? So we say bakes. So Aunt Leah and Uncle Peter, they bake, but bakes. Although the players and the coach admit that the team struggled this season, they hope to do better next year. All right, so although the players and the coach, do we say admit or admits that the team struggled this season, they hope to do better next year. All right, so we can say although the players and the coach admit or admits, let's see, admits, was it admit? Ah, it's just admit, not admits. So they admit that they haven't done very well this season. So when we stay at Mr. Kemp's farm, either the rooster or the pigs wake us up early in the morning. All right. So when we stay at Mr. Kemp's farm, either the rooster or the pigs wake us up in the morning. Is it wake or wakes? Wake or wakes us up in the morning. All right. So we can say it wake the pigs. They wake us up every morning. The roosters and the pigs, they wake us up in the morning. All right, so now we're going to correct the errors with the subject verb agreement, right? And when we correct the errors with the subject verb agreement, then it means that we're going to have to look at our singular subject as well as our plural subject, right? In order to correct whichever words or within the sentences. So the verb, okay, no, let's go to the subject and the verb. The subject and the verb in a sentence or clause must agree in a number, right? And when a subject is singular, we need to use a singular verb. And we say that when we use a singular verb, it usually ends in S, ES, or IES. All right. And when we have our singular verb, right, that either ends in S, ES, or IES, or specifically just in S, right? It says Sarah visits her grandmother, right? And we said a singular verb it usually ends in S. So, for example, Sarah visits her grandmother. So, which means that we add the S to that specific verb. And then Brian teaches art history. Teaches art history. So, which means that we add our S or ES to that specific verbs, right? Or let's say within that sentence. All right, and then we have our plural, right? Our plural subject or plural verb. And we use a plural verb, right? Usually we use a plural verb and we do not, and it does not end with an S. So a singular verb ends with an S, but a plural verb does not end with an S. All right. So we see that when a subject is plural, we use a plural verb, and plural verbs do not end in S. For example, Kylie and Tracy, they walk home, not walks home, they walk home. Those brownies smell delicious. No S. Yeah. So we say it's Kylie, Kyle, and JC, they walk home, right, without the S, as well as those brownies smell delicious. So which means that if it is a plural verb and then we add the S, right? And subject verb agreements, right? It is usually determined by the simple subject. Remember that the simple subject and the verb, they aren't always adjacent. All right. So we said even when it comes to subject verb agreements, it is usually determined by the simple subject. And remember that the simple subject and the verb, they aren't adjacent. For example, the excitement of the fans is palpable. All right. So we see that a subject verb agreement, it is usually determined by the simple subject, and the simple subject and the verb, they aren't always adjacent, right? So for example, the excitement of the fans is palpable, or saying the violinists who perform the duet work together quite often. All right. So now we're going on to our test, right? So we need to find the error with the subject verb agreement. Select the incorrect verb and type it correctly. So Mr. Perry is trying to concentrate on his yard work, but a swarm of bees keep distracting him. So we say Mr. Perry is trying to concentrate on his yard work, but a swarm of bees do we say keep or keeps distracting him? All right, so we can say that Mr. Perry is trying to concentrate on his yard work, but the bees keep distracting him. The bees keep distracting him. Right, so keeps, because they remember we said that with a singular verb, right, it needs to match with an s, or more like an s is then added to the verb. The students elected to lead our school beautification committee as the students elected to lead our school beautification committee has several inspiring ideas, including a mural in the gym and the relocation of the garbage cans from near the school entrance to behind the cafeteria. So we say the students elected to lead our school beautification committee has several inspiring ideas, or they have inspiring ideas. So they have inspiring ideas. Taiwan's tea production date back to the early 18th century. The country is now known for its coloring black and green teas. So we say Taiwan's tea production dates back to the early 18th century. The country is now known for its long black and green teas. Right? So we can say that it dates back to the 18th centuries. So dates back to the 18th century. You may be familiar with origami, the Japanese art of paper folding, but did you know that there are a variation called kirigami, which involves both folding and cutting? All right. So we can say you may be familiar with origami, the Japanese art of paper, but did you know that there are a variation called kirigami, which involves both folding and cutting? All right, so we can say the is. All right, so we are at the end now of our lesson on correcting or basically on subject verb agreement, right? And we said a subject and a verb are in sentences or clause and they must agree in number, whether it is in singular, whether it's singular or it is plural, right? Singulars use a singular verb and it ends in s. Plural use a plural verb and it does not end in s, right? All right, so that is now the end of our lesson on subject verb agreement. Thank you very much for joining the class. You must have a good evening further. Goodbye.